Today I'd like to talk a little bit about work and life balance and how that incorporates into Locum Tenens, which is what my company does. If you're not familiar with locums, if you've never worked locums or known anybody that has, I'll give you a little bit of explanation about locums and how it can apply to what you might be looking for in a job, what you might be looking for down the road or after training. Locum Tenens is essentially temporary coverage, gap coverage that we work with a lot of facilities, both hospital systems, small clinics, individual practices that provide coverage from everything from small vacations to maternity leave to interim coverage while a facility might be looking for somebody on a permanent level. Locums typically is something that people aren't as familiar with because the general transition is you go through training, you finish your residency or your fellowship, and the next step is to go out and find a permanent position. And 10, 15 years ago, locums was generally looked upon as last minute, urgent, we've got to have somebody right now in sense of an emergency type coverage. But over the last 5 to 10 years, it's really become more of a mainstream and recruiting process for hospitals because it's a vital part of bringing people in more of a long-term interview process is what we like to look at. So locums typically, like a company ours, we work not only with pediatrics, but as OBGYN is part of the specialties that I oversee, but it's also, we cover all specialties. So specifically with pediatrics, we work with pediatric critical care physicians, neonatologists, pediatric hospitalists, and we're noticing that in the pediatric realm, we're starting to see more and more needs in urgent care. The hospitalist sector is really starting to separate itself from more of the standard general pediatrics call coverage. So we're starting to see a split within just outpatient coverage as well as hospitalists. For somebody that might be interested in locums, it's really important for you to have a kind of an understanding about what you're looking for. As I mentioned, most of the time physicians that we work with are either directly out of training and haven't found that exact position they're looking for or the location they want to work at. So it's a good opportunity for you to travel, see some of the country, see some different types of practice opportunities before you settle down and make long-term commitments. Also work with a lot of physicians that maybe are in a transitional period. Maybe you've been working with a practice in a certain area for a number of years, you're looking to make a move to a different part of the country, or just looking for something different in a different type of specialty into pediatrics. We also have a third party of physicians that we normally work with, and we like to say that they're semi-retired. Those of you that maybe have been in practice for 15, 20 years, you've had your own practice or you've been an employee for a long time, you're not ready to stop seeing patients or practicing medicine, but you're also interested in not having a full-time job. Locums can provide you the ability to work as much as you want. Typically what I tell individuals that are looking to find out more information about locums is flexibility is really the key. It allows you to work as much as you want. As I mentioned, you can work 6 months out of the year, you can work 3 months out of the year, but it's predicated on the needs that are out there. We contract directly with hospitals when they have urgent needs, when they have pre-planned needs. We work with a lot of facilities, as I said, with maternity leave coverage. If there's an expectation that the physician's going to be out for an extended period of time, you could go work somewhere for a few months. And also it works into somewhat of a long-term interview. If a facility is looking for a general pediatrician, they're maybe trying to start a practice within the hospital, it's a good scenario for you to go work 30 days, 60 days or longer, get a good feel for the practice, get a good feel for the community before you make that long-term commitment. We kind of like to call it a working interview. So what we do as a locums company is we contract with hospitals, some of the hospitals that are here with these urgent needs or these long-term needs, and we'll set up a contract with them, and then we'll set up a contract with you as an independent contractor. If it's a scenario that you're interested in, you can work with them through us as an independent contractor. We take care of your travel, your housing, and more importantly, your malpractice coverage. The insurance that's provided by my company is an occurrence-based malpractice insurance, which covers your tail coverage for life. It's different than claims made if you're not as familiar with it. The most important thing to remember is if you have a claim after a fiscal year, occurrence policy is going to protect you for the long term. So if a claim comes up 5 years down the road after you work, say for a location in this year or in 2014, you're still provided that tail coverage. You don't have to be responsible for that on your own. The other option with that is, as I mentioned, we provide your expenses and your travel. So if we find an opportunity for you in a different state that you don't have a state license, we may provide you that license and the coverage and the expense on that, but we'll also take care of your travel, long-term housing, whether it's a hotel, an apartment, and all expenses that are not personal for you to go there and just essentially help out and practice medicine. On top of that, the contracts that you have are contingent contracts. So you're not required, you're not locked into a certain amount of time that you have to work for a company like mine or another firm. It's really up to you. And that's where that flexibility comes in. If you find a permanent position down the road that it's more interesting to you and it's really what you were looking for, these short-term opportunities allow you to continue to practice supplemental income until you can find that perfect job. A couple other things to think about with locums, whether you work with MDA or you work with another firm, it is important that you get to know your recruiter, you express to your recruiter exactly what you're looking for. There are a lot of hurdles, there's a lot of credentialing and a lot of privileging that you have to do with individual hospitals. So the more that you work with a recruiter and they know exactly what you're looking for, the better off you are in terms of them being able to represent you and finding the perfect opportunity. As far as the hesitations that I see or some of the hurdles that most physicians find, as I mentioned, licensure. If you're licensed in one state and you've gone through that process, you recognize that it can be somewhat of a long-term or a long delay. We work with a lot of the state licensure boards and we've got relationships with them, so we can sometimes expedite that process. So if a hospital, let's say in Texas, which is one of the worst states to get a license in terms of longevity and what it takes to get the license, if a hospital is looking for somebody, they may have a physician that's planned out 6 months down the road, but they're waiting on a license. That's where we really come in and we help to maybe expedite that license, or we help to cover the practice until they get somebody on board. And since some states do offer a temporary license, it can allow you to work there versus waiting on a 6 months or a 7 month or 8 month type licensure process. It allows you to work now instead of having to wait. One of the, I would say the negatives about locums, if there is one, is really the uncertainty. Because again, our jobs are predicated on what the hospital's needs are. So you might be looking, say, in Philadelphia, for example, and there may be an opportunity there, but if it doesn't fit with exactly what you're looking for, it's very difficult for us to create a job for you. So the idea with that is not only is it flexible for you, it's important for you to be flexible. And if you're really wanting to make locums a career, whether it's short-term or long-term, you might want to consider the ability to travel. And like I said, if we're able to help you out with some licensure, that's going to allow you to do some of that traveling. And I know sometimes with certain individuals, travel's not an option with your family or other restrictions. So locums can still be a part of your life or part of what you're looking for in your certain area. The idea, though, is if you open your parameters and you're willing to look at other areas outside of your general comfort zone, if you will, you're more likely to find more opportunities. But again, it has to fit with what your lifestyle is. And that's part of, I believe, how locums fits into the life balance. You can really decide how much you want to work. If you're open to doing some of those things, if you're open to looking at other areas, it'll help you balance that out. If you just want to work for 6 months, we work with a lot of physicians that live overseas, or they work overseas on maybe an international type locums coverage. So when they're over there, it's still important for them to come back and keep their licensure up, keep their practice up here, and they'll work 6 months, 3 months at a time. A lot of physicians, as I mentioned, in that semi-retired state where they don't want to have the full-time coverage or the full-time practice, they may work 1 or 2 weeks a month, can rotate generally throughout the year. And a lot of our clients like that too, especially during this type of season as we get into October through March, cold and flu, RSV, where the patient loads really increase. Instead of a hospital hiring somebody full-time, they'll come to us and hire individuals for 4 or 5 months, and it allows them to help their patient load, but it doesn't set them up long-term. One of the things to obviously consider about locums, as I mentioned, is kind of the locums to perm. I always recommend to hospitals that we work with to bring somebody in, let them work for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, because it gives not only you the opportunity to really see what it's like to work there. You know, most of your interview processes are a weekend or maybe a couple of weekends, and everybody's on their best behavior, and it's, you know, everybody's looking to say the right things. But when you get in and work for 30 days, or you really get into the practice or the hospital, you get to see if it's a good fit for you, not only from a clinical standpoint, but also from a personality standpoint. If you look at locums as a long-term career, one of the things I would advise is that you not only work with MDA, you work with other companies. As much as we'd like to have you work exclusively with us and find opportunities exclusively with us, the reality is there's other firms out there that may have contracts, may have relationships with other hospitals. So it's important for you, since you're not exclusive to a company, to make sure all your options are open. Like I said, we'd like to, as a recruiting group, keep you working as many days as we can throughout the year. But however, it's the reality that there may be some areas that you aren't looking for, that I don't have a contract with. So because you're not exclusive, you can open that up. Just always make sure, as I mentioned, that you explain to your recruiter, you really work with the recruiter on terms of what you're looking for. Because our job as recruiters, of course, is to not only help you, but to help these hospitals fill their jobs. So we work, kind of that mediator between the two. So we want to know exactly what you're looking for. I want to be able to say, okay, I know this physician only is looking for outpatient, or I know this physician is really a hospitalist looking for a hospitalist position. So we want to filter that down to make sure that what we send you as an option is tailored to what you're looking for. Now, you may get emails or calls from us with different jobs and say, that's not really what I want. Again, that idea is that the more jobs that we have, we want to put them in front of you to let you make that decision. That's the key on locums, and I think that's really works into the life balance, because you kind of have the ultimate decision on what you want to do. Again, the other side of that is your work is predicated on what the opportunities are. So with a full-time job, there's more security. But with locums, you do have to kind of run that risk of, okay, I know I may be 2 weeks where I'm not working, or a month where I'm not working. But again, if you open up your parameters, it really gives you the opportunity to look at some different options. Other thing about locums is I have a lot of questions that people say in terms of, how does that work with me, with benefits? Since I'm not an employee of MDA, since I'm not an employee of a competitor, as an independent contractor, I always advise that you seek a CPA. There are some advantages to setting up an LLC, tax purposes that we can't really advise you on. Also, benefits are not provided through a locums company like ours, because you're an independent contractor, because of that flexibility. So there are some avenues out there where you can get some health insurance and benefits that way. But your recruiters can generally lead you in that direction. Their main purpose and my main purpose is to make sure, as I said, that we get enough opportunities out in front of you to be able to make qualified decisions on where you want to be. The other thing about with locums, and I think with life balancing compared, the salaries are going to vary, and it depends on location. It depends on the type of opportunity. Obviously, with a higher acuity, we're going to see a higher increase. Different regions of the company, East Coast and West Coast, our contracts are predicated on the needs and the competition. However, we're able to get more money generally on rural areas where it's harder for people to recruit, because that's where the higher need is. Because the malpractice is provided for you, I always advise people to consider that. When you try to compare a permanent job salary to locums, it's not going to be as high. But you've obviously got your expenses paid for, your travel, your housing. So you have to work that in and make sure that that's part of how you're configuring what the pay scale and what the pay rate would be. Normally, again, it's going to depend on the region, but it's comparable, especially with the hospitalist market growing as it is, and we're starting to see that separation between the hospital side and the clinical side. We work with a lot of government facilities that their pay scale is a little bit different, but the advantage there is with a federal facility, whether it's Indian Health or whether it's a military facility that we work with, you're able to use a state license. Say you have a Texas license and we've got an opportunity in Arizona or North Carolina, or where Arizona, Oklahoma, up in the Dakotas, there's a lot of Indian Health facilities up there that have needs. You can utilize your state license there without having to go through the licensure process. So there's some advantages there. Like I said, our biggest hurdle probably is the licensure, because that's what kind of holds us back on helping out clients as soon as possible. But again, your flexibility and your availability to open up your parameters is really going to dictate how much more or how many more opportunities are given to you.